The first presentation is a fun presentation called Design, the Evolutionary Nightmare. Design has absolutely driven many evolutionary scientists completely out of their belief system. As a matter of fact, you all know the story of Dr. Dean Kenyon, who probably was the leading theoretical biologist and evolutionist of the 20th century, at least the latter half of the 20th century. If not the leading, he was in the top 5, probably in the world. And he was a professor at San Francisco State University, and he wrote a book called Biochemical Predestination, and he thought, by his own testimony, that he had worked out every problem with the evolutionary model and had explained everything by materialistic naturalism, until one day he met a young man who took his class as a freshman boy and had made it his purpose to win Dr. Kenyon to the Lord. And he gave him a book on the first day of class written by Dr. A.E. Wilder Smith. Dr. Wilder Smith earned 3 PhDs in chemistry. He passed away in the latter part of the 80s. He was such a warrior for the faith in Europe. He lived in Switzerland. And in one of his 30 or 40 books that he wrote was a book entitled The Natural Sciences Know Nothing of Evolution. Hundreds of thousands of these books has been sold in Europe, especially Germany. And so it was first written in German, then it was translated ultimately into English. And so he handed this to Dr. Kenyon, and every day before class would begin, he would ask Dr. Kenyon, "Have you read that book?" Well, he said the young man was persistent and patient. Those are the 2 key words, persistent and patient. And kindly he would ask him, "Have you read the book?" Kind of like the little widow woman in Luke 18. Kept knocking on the door. After the 6th week, Dr. Kenyon said, the young man was about to drive me nuts. So I decided to read the book and refute it and be done with it. And he said, I read it, but couldn't refute it. And instantly, what I was blinded to in the model that I had developed, I saw a glaring hole. And from that, he began seeking who it was that would be this intelligence that could make these incredible, irreducible, complex systems in biochemical pathways. He said, whoever that is, I've got to know who that is. And from that research, he found Jesus Christ and has become an incredible Christian man. And so here's an example of how the intricate, purposeful, irrefutable design systems in the whole of creation has the handiwork and imprint of God on it. You remember in the book of Romans, Paul said, the invisible things of God since the creation are clearly seen. Okay? And so these are some of those creation-driven signposts that point to Christ. And Paul said at the end of that verse, he said, in essence, if you don't see that, you're without excuse. And the word excuse there is the Greek word apologia, meaning without a reasoned response. If you don't see the signature of God in these incredible, intricate systems. And so I want to talk about just a few of tens times tens of thousands of possible illustrations that could be given. We don't have time, nor do I, even in a lifetime, to even begin to exhaust things that could be used as illustrations of this incredible design, which requires that someone had to know the end from the beginning. In from the beginning. Work into that circle from the outside. It requires a transcendental intelligence reaching into the system and making chemistry and physical matter do what it would not normally do in natural sorts of reactions and activities. Well, when we observe the universe with all of its architectural wonder, we are just left speechless at the wonder and amazement of God. How can this informational masterpiece we call the universe be explained? And today there is a growing model in science, and it's incorporating and enlisting greater numbers all the time that are understanding that it's not physics and it's not chemistry that explains the wonder of life. It's information. Where did the information come from? Who put the information in the genetics? And there's some neat ideas about that. Well, there's a lot of explanations offered for how you explain the universe, and one of those is by Sir Julian Huxley, the grandson of Thomas Henry Huxley. Julian Huxley was the first Director General of UNESCO, that great branch of the United Nations, and he was very impactful in the first half of the 20th century in the direction of educational processes, not only in this country but worldwide. And he pointed out in a book called Issues in Evolution, page 45, Darwin pointed out that no supernatural designer was needed, since natural selection could account for any known form of life. There was no room for supernatural agency in its evolution. We can now dismiss entirely all ideas of a supernatural overriding mind being responsible for the evolutionary processes. And they have pursued that random naturalism, and it's led them to a dead-end street. I mean, there are just some things that are irreducibly complex. And this is a model that was first presented, in my understanding, by Michael Behe in a famous book he wrote, Darwin's Black Box. If you haven't read that, you should read that. Behe is a biochemist at Lehigh University, and he offers this notion of irreducible complexity. And his famous analogy is the analogy of the mousetrap, and that there are 5 moving pieces or working parts of the mousetrap, and asks the question, which of those parts could you remove from the mousetrap and the mousetrap still work? So he said, when you get to the mousetrap with its platform and its bait tray and its spring and its lever and its catch, those 5 pieces, what can you take off of the mousetrap and the mousetrap still be functional? Nothing. In other words, the 5-part mousetrap is irreducibly complex. Every part is vital for the whole to function. And so in that kind of understanding, it becomes amazing when you look at biochemical pathways. And there's a wonderful video that's been produced by many of these scientists called Understanding the Mystery of Life. And you have some at the school. You should look at them. Professor Provine wrote in the journal Bioscience in 1982, the month of June, another explanation similar to Huxley's. He said, quote, modern evolutionary biology has shattered the hope that some kind of designing or purposive force guided human evolution. Instead, biology leads to a wholly mechanistic view of life. There are no gods and no designing forces. The frequently made assertion that modern biology and the assumptions of the Judeo-Christian tradition are fully compatible is fully false. Well, that idea has caused some serious problems today because they're finding things out since we've understood the use of electron microscopes and scanning microscopes that magnify things hundreds of thousands of times. We're seeing things that just absolutely cannot be explained outside of some kind of overwhelming, overriding design and intelligence. It is either the enchant processes in matter or the intelligent design of an omnipotent, omniscient God. There are no other alternatives. On the basis of cause-effect, which is a primary principle in scientific investigation, could the universe be its own cause? I don't think so. Because an effect cannot be greater than its cause. Obviously, there had to be a cause greater than the universe. Another explanation to this, I think, is a more satisfying, more academically qualifying kind of explanation, and it is really undergirding to me. It's the biblical explanation, and I'm going to stage and base the rest of the presentation on this passage in the book of Job, chapter 12, verse 10. The Bible says, "But ask the beasts, and they will teach you, and the birds of the air, and they shall tell you. Or speak to the earth, and it will teach you, and the fish of the sea will explain to you. Who among all these," that is, beasts, birds, earth, and fish, "who among all these, life science, physical science, earth science, who among all these does not know that the hand of the Lord hath done this?" That the hand of the Lord hath done this. And then in Colossians 1:16, the Bible says, "For by him all things were created that are in heaven and that are on earth, visible and invisible." Think about visible and invisible. Things that are non-microscopic and things that are microscopic. Whether thrones or dominions, principalities or powers. Of course, this overflows into the realms of spiritual realities as well. All things were created through him and for him, and he is before all things, and by him all things consist, stick together. And then here's the famous verse in Romans 1:20, "For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things made." So, back to our theme verse, John 3:12. Jesus said, "If I've told you earthly things, beasts, birds, earth, and fish, if I've told you earthly things and you don't believe, how will you believe if I tell you heavenly things?" So to reach the mind of students and children, we first have to overcome all of this dissuading information that is pouring on them that disregard and really discredit the reality of biblical explanations for earthly things. When we can explain earthly things from the biblical perspective, it's not very difficult to explain heavenly things. So, nothing functions until everything is functional. Nothing operates until everything is operable. On the basis of slow, gradual processes through mutations or whatever other mechanism, think about the cascading enzymes necessary for blood clotting. If you have one or two of them, you're in trouble. If you have one or two or three or four of them, you're still in trouble. If it took 100,000 years to get one of them and 100,000 years to get the next one, you're never going to survive long enough for your blood to operate. So it's over. It all has to be working at the same time. How do you explain that? It's beyond the possibility of random processes. Francis Schaeffer said in his famous book, The Christian Manifesto, if you've not read that, you must read that book. Matter of fact, there's a available life work set of all of Francis Schaeffer's work. You ought to put that on your Christmas list. It's about $50-$60. It's phenomenal. Have everything he ever wrote in 4 volumes. It's wonderful to have that. He said, page 20, Christianity is not just a series of truths, but truth about reality. Truth about reality. So now, let's speak to the earth. We want to look at the minimum requirements for life on the earth. When you view the universe through a telescope, you view as much of the solar system as you can view, and you see deep into the galaxy and beyond. You ask, why here? Is there life anywhere else? Why here? I want to look at just a few of the requirements for life and answer the question, could there be life anywhere else? I think the Bible is very plain. In Psalms 115, verse 16, the Bible says, even the heavens are the Lord's, but the earth he has given to the children of men. But the earth he has given to the children of men. This precludes any possibility for life as we understand it anywhere else. Earth, spatially designed for life as we understand it. Acts 17:26 says, and he has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on all the face of the earth. So This is our habitation, the face of the earth. So, basic to life on the earth is water. Water in the liquid state. Water in all three states, but especially in the liquid state. What does the earth have that other planets do not have? Water. I saw a famous old Moody film. Dr. Mooney was, or Moon, I think his name was the narrator years and years ago, produced back in the 40s or 50s. And one of the statements was, where the water runs, there is life. That's very vital to the business of life. The amazing design of water. Most of us don't think about this, but the amazing design of water. Water is made from H2O, 2 hydrogen atoms, 1 oxygen atom. Hydrogen is a positive ion, oxygen is a negative ion. To create an electric polarity and equality in this molecule that is so vital for life, God arranged it so that the hydrogen ions connects to the oxygen at a 105-degree angle. It does amazing things because of that wonderful 105 degrees. First of all, it allows for the formation of a crystal lattice during freezing, which allows water to become less dense, allows ice to become less dense than water in the liquid state. It gives water dissolving properties. Without the dissolving properties of water, you couldn't have life at all. So the probability of water having these unique properties by chance is 1 in 15 billion, okay? 1 in 15 billion. How does this work? This is so amazing to me. As water cools, it remains dense and it maintains its same basic physical structure and relationship to its environment until it reaches about 40 degrees. And these unique angles begin to associate through positive, negative magnetism, polarity. And it creates this lattice work in ice crystals. And immediately it causes ice from 40 degrees on to 32 degrees Fahrenheit. It causes ice, or the cooling of water and then the formation of ice, to become less dense than water so that ice floats. If ice didn't float, there wouldn't be life on the earth a long time ago because it would freeze from the bottom up. But instead, it freezes from the top down. It's a phenomenon that is so incredibly designed, allowing the great currents of the ocean to continue to move and feed the properties of the earth that create most of our oxygen to live even during the coldest winters at the North Pole. Amazing. Couldn't have happened by chance. So now let's look at the placement of the earth in the scheme of things. It is commonly reported that the Milky Way is about 100,000 light years in diameter. That's huge. I heard one time, or read the other day, I guess it was, that the Milky Way, our galaxy, is rotating at about 500,000 miles an hour. But they predict that it takes, because of its immensity, about 200,000 years to make one rotation. Wow. We live in a huge universe. About 100,000 years, light years in diameter. Because of the severe gravitational forces and magnetic forces that act in the galaxy, there have been identified only 2 possible places in the galaxy where the Earth could exist in its solar system arrangement, making life possible. 2 places. What is the probability that the Earth, by chance, would have been placed in one of those 2 places in this huge galaxy? It's 1 in 150. Now we have to deal with the uniqueness of our sun. I'm only going to give you 7 of the variables that have to be in place. There are dozens times dozens times dozens of these variables I don't even have time to talk about. But the uniqueness of our sun, there are lots of different suns. I think it's interesting to note that the Bible never calls our sun a star. I think that's interesting. The Bible always refers to our sun as the sun or the greater light. For life to exist on the earth, we must have a sun with the proper temperature, the proper size, and the proper brightness, because water in the liquid state is the key. A degree or two closer or farther away from the sun would automatically make this an impossibility. It is reported that 100 billion suns exist in our galaxy. They say that if possibly a million of these bodies were like ours, what is the probability of by chance the Earth being located in the solar system in the proper place and then having a sun like our sun? The chance is 1 in 1,000. 1 in 1,000. Now, the combined probability of being located in the solar system properly and having the right sun, the chance is 1 in 150,000 that it would happen by chance. Now let's look at our placement in the solar system. It is critical that we recognize that our place in the solar system is of significance, because all living systems consist mostly of water in the liquid state. Between 80% and 99% of all living systems excuse me, let me say that again. Living systems are comprised of between 80 and 99% water, okay? And because water has such a narrow temperature threshold in the centigrade scale, 0 to 100, in the Fahrenheit scale, 32 to 212, the Earth must be in a proper distance in order for water to maintain its liquid state. The chances of that happening in our solar system by randomness is 1 in 10. Now, the combined probability is 1 in 1,500,000. Let's look at other critical variables. Let's look first of all at the spin rate of the Earth, necessary for heat balance. Chance, 1 in 10. Proper planet mass, vital for atmosphere. Probability, 1 in 10. Proper axis angle for seasonal consistency. The chances by random processes, 1 in 10. Now combine all of those 6 variables happening by chance. The chance is 1 in 1,500,000,000 that it happened by chance, with just 6 variables of the dozens times dozens that are necessary for life to exist on the Earth. Add the proper magnetic field, you add another component of 1 in 10, so that with just 7 variables for life to exist on the Earth, you have 1 in 15 billion. It gets more impossible all the time that this could happen by chance. And so there's a probability chart you can look at. If you'd like a copy of that to share with your students or your children, I'll be happy to give you a copy of this probability chart, and it shows all of these things listed in this regard. So the combined probability then is 1 in 15 billion. Have you ever noticed or compared or had the opportunity to look at a river rock in one hand and an arrowhead in the other hand? Both are rocks made of minerals. You look at the river rock, and it is the result of the movement of water and the erosion of the soft minerals and the hard minerals, with the soft minerals being removed first, so that you see a very random process of natural activities of erosion smoothing this rock and giving it a shape that is very random. When you look at an arrowhead, you look that hard minerals and soft minerals have been removed with equal facility, obviously giving this an intent and a design for a specific purpose. So the difference between a river rock and an arrowhead is intelligence. Intelligence. If your theory of origins is chemicals plus matter plus time equals life, you have a problem with real science. But if your theory of origins is chemicals plus matter plus time plus intelligence equals life, you're right on, because that's supportive everywhere you look. So let's look at some incredible things. First thing I want to look at is the woodpecker. Have you ever thought about a woodpecker? The woodpecker is an amazing thing. It has some very special design features. They're irreducibly complex. It has a special drilling tool. I mean, a woodpecker can sit on the side of a tree, and it has been measured to whack that tree at many times gravity. I heard one time that some woodpeckers can hit the tree 100 times gravity. Now think about that special drilling tool it has to have. But not only does it have a special drilling tool, if it flew up on the tree, say it evolved this special drilling tool and said, I'm going to drill a hole in that tree over there, and it flies up on the tree and whacks the tree and smush, its brains go right out its ears. In the head of a woodpecker are special shock absorbers, okay, right behind the drilling tool that keeps it from disjoining its brain. So it has these spatial cartilaginous shock absorbers. And not only that, it has spatial feet. It doesn't have perching feet. It has very special feet, 2 toes forward, 2 toes rearward, just designed for sitting vertically on the side of a tree. I watched a woodpecker this summer feed at one of my bird feeders. I love to feed birds and watch them. And it flew up to the bird feeder. Instead of sitting in the tray, it hooked its 2 foretoes on the side of the tray and hung its body down to the side of the tray and rocked up and got the seed out of the tray, because it has 2 toes forward, 2 toes rear. It doesn't have perching feet. It has these specially designed toes just for sitting on the side of a tree. Has very special feathers and muscles in the tail feather structure that allow it this incredible leverage to rock against the tree and hammer it with such incredible force. But like the oil researchers in Oklahoma and Texas, if you drill a half a dozen dry holes, you're going to quit drilling, right? So what is he drilling holes in the tree for ultimately? He's looking for grubs and worms and other things in order to eat. So most people don't know this, but the woodpecker has such an incredibly designed tongue. The woodpecker's tongue, in most cases, is as long as its entire body. Most people don't understand that. Well, where are you going to get a tongue like that? He has a spatial sheath that's been designed that goes around from the left side over his eye, around the back of his head, the right side over his eye, anchored over the right eye, and around behind his head, and enters the mouth at the back of the beak. Now, there are some of these woodpeckers, if you can observe them closely when they're hammering, you'll notice that there's a pulsating motion on the back of their head. It's that tongue running around from the back of their head and being extended out their beak every time they hammer, okay? In other words, they have this incredibly long tongue, and they have to have a very special place. Now think about them being able to sit for 1,000,000 years and get this tongue because they're tired of starving to death, but they don't realize they got to have a place to put it. So they get this big long tongue, they fly off the limb with this big long tongue, they catch it on a limb, they wrap it around the tongue, they beat their brains out on the side of the tree. In other words, nothing works until everything works. It's got to all be in place. These are amazing design features. Let's look at the Arctic tern. The Arctic tern is just a remarkable animal. It has the longest migration routes of any migratory or migrating bird in the world. It flies between 22 and 24,000 miles a year, 10 to 12,000 miles each direction. It will summer up on the north shores of Alaska and winter at the southern tip of South America. Incredible. Some research has been done on the tern to try to figure out how in the world it can find its place. It always goes to the same place. It will return to where it was hatched, and it'll go winter at the very place where its mother goes as well. And so it returns to each of these destinations twice a year. So an ornithologist from the University of Wisconsin at Madison a few years ago did some experimentation with an Arctic tern. They went up on the northern shores of Alaska. They banded a mother tern and took her eggs out of the nest. They took the eggs back to Madison, Wisconsin, and incubated them and hatched them and raised the young terns, 5 of them, in the laboratory. They deliberately waited until a week after the general migration and returned to the northern shores of Alaska, to the island where this bird had laid her eggs, where they'd first picked up these eggs, and they dropped one of the young terns that was raised in the laboratory out of the airplane. They said it circled the island a time or two and then flew straight south, and in just a few days it landed within 6 feet of its mother. That rolls my socks up and down. They took one of them to Australia. There's never been a known migratory route for Arctic terns from Australia across the southern Pacific. They took it to Australia, and just a few days, it landed on the same island with its mother. They took one of the young terns, to Madison, Wisconsin, and dropped it out at Madison, Wisconsin, where the university was. It took 39 days for it to get figured out, but in 39 days, it landed on the same island at the tip of South America with its mother. There's no way to explain that. They thought, well, they learned this, or they used magnetic field arrangements, or they use smell, or they use sight, or they use sound. And so they have created ways that they put lenses on the tern's eyes that they couldn't see anything. Took the same amount of time, flew right to their destination. They put little hearing devices on their ears that created all kinds of noise to confuse them. It took the same amount of time. They flew right to the same island. They put little pads on their beak to mess up their sense of smell. They flew right. Wasn't smell, wasn't sound, wasn't sight. They put some special devices on the birds that would really distort any kind of magnetic field arrangement, and they flew right to the same island with their mother. In other words, there is an instinctual arrangement in the tern that can only be explained by creative design and organization. So, what are the chances of these things happening? Just by randomness? The minimum requirements for life on the earth are not likely to happen without an intelligent force reversing the likely and causing the unlikely. What chemistry normally does will kill you. There has to be a program imposed upon chemistry to make it do what it would not normally do. And when your biology gives up on your chemistry, you will die. Because chemistry will kill you. It takes biology to make chemistry function. It's very important. Living systems then become irreducibly complex. We talked about the bombardier beetle. The bombardier beetle has this amazing makeup. Can you imagine the bombardier beetle that wanted, think about this little beetle that wanted to be able to explode spatial chemicals so he could defend himself against frogs. And so he runs out and figures out if he could get some hydroquinone and some peroxide and get this special enzyme. And so he gets all that in place, but he forgets he needs an explosion chamber. So he mixes it all up, and he feels this, this incredibly building up heartburn, and then it explodes, and he destroys himself. So in the evolution of the bombardier beetle, you'll go around finding huge amounts of these investigating beetles blowing themselves up. How in the world did he do this by chance and accident in gradual arrangements over millions of years? It couldn't have happened. All the wonderful mechanisms, the nervous response systems, all the things that makes the bombardier beetle work had to be in place at the beginning or he couldn't work. I like to talk about the real Batrachus, the little brown frog in Australia. The little brown frog in Australia is an amazing little creature because he has some spatial kinds of mechanisms that allow him to reproduce his family or her family. When the female brown frog lays her eggs and they're fertilized, she swallows them. Wow. She keeps them in her stomach for 6 weeks. The first generation of this happening, once the little brown frog thought this is a wonderful way to hatch my eggs, the first generation of this happening, unless there's an incredible list of things already functioning, she would have become extinct in 1 generation because she would have digested her eggs and there would have been no offspring. The mother gives up eating and drinking for 6 weeks and is fed by biological processes from the stores of food in her body. She still has to deal with the remaining hydrochloric acid and pepsin in her stomach because that would instantly kill the eggs. There is a special hormone-like substance that is secreted first from the egg capsules. How did this get in the egg capsule? This spatial hormone-like substance called prostaglandin E2. It's in the egg capsule, and it's secreted into the mother's stomach, instantly neutralizing all digestive fluids. And then it is in the tadpole when it hatches in her stomach. It also has this prostaglandin, and it's secreted from the tadpole, maintaining this neutral environment in the mother's stomach. Well, how do the tadpoles grow to be little frogs? They actually develop from tadpole to frogs in her stomach. They don't have a tadpole stage, this frog. There were little tadpoles swim around in water. They do that in the mother's stomach. And she develops these little frogs as if her stomach became a womb. They have special eggs. No other frog has these special eggs. Has a huge protein-rich yolk, largest of all frog eggs. And the frogs have enough food in the yolk of their egg to survive for 6 weeks. Then, when it's time for them to be born, the esophagus of the mother frog dilates like a female cervix. And the babies are born literally through her mouth and swim out into the water, little baby frogs looking just like its mama. That's remarkable. When did that start happening by chance? That can't happen by chance, folks. Nothing works until everything works. Let me talk about the termite. The Sonoran Desert termites. They just love to eat wood. Chomp, 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 chomp. But none of them possess cellulase, the enzyme necessary to digest cellulose. No termite has cellulase. That's found in fungi and other kinds of protozoans. But the Sonoran Desert termites have a protozoan in their stomach. The protozoan in this mutualistic arrangement eats the cellulose and converts it into sugar, and the termite and the protozoan eat and feed off of this sugar. When the new termites are born, they eat particles of their siblings' feces and inoculate themselves with these protozoans. But when was this arrangement made? When did the first protozoan know that it couldn't eat cellulose and had to seek out its own spatial, or when did the first termite realize it couldn't digest cellulose and it sought out this special protozoan? When did that deal get cut? If they didn't figure that out right quickly, 1 generation and they're gone because they can't digest cellulose, but they eat wood voraciously. I just think this is remarkable. So when we understand these kinds of arrangements, it becomes overwhelmingly obvious that nothing can function until everything functions. Nothing is operable until everything operates. For by him all things were created that are in heaven and on earth and visible and invisible. All things were created through him and for him. He is before all things, and by him all things consist. That's the only way to explain it.